So as an additional type of structure that we might need to get from the interface is how we're going to pick elements. And this is a really important subject because if we're not able to pick elements without the user running the Dynamo player, or if we're doing other type of selection, perhaps we will take some little time. So for doing that, I'm just going to go with a direct Python script. I'm just going to delete the input and start editing. First thing we need to have on this script is we're going to get rid of the Python of the Dynamo geometry. We're just going to add some classes that goes with the Revit references, and I will leave this code for you to read it. So we're talking about these classes. This will be the basic boilerplate. It's adding the Revit API user interface so we can select the Revit API so we can access the DB documents, using the Revit nodes from Dynamo so that we can import extensions and change the object elements. And the last one is importing the Revit services to have a document and transaction manager. Those two elements are actually enabling the document to be visible enough so that if we're clicking and we're doing a transaction, the elements are picked back. So once we have already that ones, we need to start our document. Since we don't have an input, that will work fine. For starting our document, I'm just going to copy these ones, which are from a database. It's using the document manager, the instance current database document, and within the document, having the active UI document. Those two are the ones that are going to help us find out which elements we are selecting. We can also call the view, calling it from the UI doc active view, and that way we know that on the active view we're clicking, we're going to get that values return. So next element we need to declare is we're going to use a selector. The selector is calling the document to do a selection, and we're going to call it within a message. For that, I'm going to do it manually. The message that we want to send is select a column to start performing. We have the advantage that with the selection we can specify which type of element we want to get on execution, and then we're going to work with the message to be shown. So this one says the selector. All right, so now we have the selector, we have the elements to be performed. Our next step is to create the selection object. So let's call it transaction. Yeah, I can call it from that. We don't need to write it. The command is called transaction manager instance enumerate in transaction, and the ending point is going to be called the transaction manager instant transaction tasks is done. So in between this, it's going to be the Revit creation of the element or the Revit transaction that is going to be running. So we're going to give it a try if something is missing around. We haven't seen the try function, and the only thing with the try function is that the try function requires accept, so that if it's not running, it's going to end the function to be working on a loop. And then the concept we need to have is we're just going to create an element, element 1, to be the document get element. It's going to use a selector pick object function. With it requires an object to be used. The object we're using, it's going to be the object we're using. It's going to be called the object 1, and it's going to be exactly a selection object type element. So it's performing on any type of element. We can also change that one to be more specific so that only columns can be selected. But for now, we're going to leave it as general as it is. Object 1 with the message 1, select the column to be selected, dot element ID. So the selector is going to get an object. It's going to give us the ID, and the ID is going to give us the element itself at the end. So the except here is going to give us pass. If nothing interesting is happening, I just want it to go off. So if we run it, it says select a column to start performing. Just close it. I selected. And if I go back to the code, should look, yeah, L1 is not defined. So a couple of errors to be checked out. The option is object actually. The selector is selector 1. And just because we're not having any type of tryouts, we just want to have one selector being running. So this transaction will start, perform, get the selector, and that's it. So we run it, it says select a column to start performing. It says it's called the selector. If we click on a column, it ends, and it's giving us just the element we selected.